Welcome to the Improve81 podcast series. I'm Ken Slack, Communications Coordinator for the Interstate 81 Corridor Improvement Program. Today we're going to be talking about plans for one of our bigger projects. It's the widening of the interstate through the Harrisonburg area. I'm joined by Dave Covington, I-81 Program Delivery Director, and Scott Alexander, who is Project Manager for the Harrisonburg widening. So Dave and Scott, tell us now a little bit more about your roles with the interstate program and this project in particular.
Yeah, good morning, Ken. Again, as you mentioned, I'm the I-81 Program Delivery Director, and what does that really mean? It means that I really try to make sure that we're being consistent in our approach on projects along the corridor. We do span 325 miles through 3 different districts and have different groups of people who are, working on the projects, and try to just provide some insight as to, how we've handled certain situations on other projects to give drivers a sense of some consistency as they drive along the entire corridor.
Hi, Ken. I'm Scott Alexander. I'm the Assistant District L&D Engineer for Stanton District, and I'm the Project Manager for the Harrisonburg widening.
Now, this widening, in very general terms, goes from mile markers 242 to 248. So we're going 3 lanes in each direction. So that's sort of the broad brush strokes. So give me a little more detail, Scott, about what this project entails.
Right, so we'll be widening I-81 both directions, beginning about a mile south of the 243 interchange, going all the way through the city to about a mile north of the Route 33 interchange.
Now that includes, that's a lot of work along the way. It's not just bumping out the interstate. There's a whole lot of other things that go along with that. Drainage work, bridges, things like that. I mean, this is a big project.
It definitely is. We have quite a number of bridges we'll be tackling as part of the project, either widening or replacing. We have culverts, dozens of culverts that we'll be attacking during the project, rehabbing and extending. We have drainage concerns we'll be addressing. Stormwater management is a big part of the project as well.
So several miles of widening along a pretty busy part of Interstate 81, but there's more than just laying down some more asphalt. Bridges, culverts, a lot of drainage work involved in this. What else are we talking about here?
You covered most of it. We'll be addressing a lot of drainage concerns. Stormwater management is a big part of the project. One of the most noticeable differences, the cable guardrail will be replaced with concrete barrier. It'll take on a little bit different nature as we're driving down the roadway.
Well, and maybe we touch on that, because this will look a little bit different than what people are used to now. On most parts of Interstate 81, we've got grass and trees, inside and outside the travel lanes. This is going to be a pretty urban feel interstate when it's done, right?
It will. Of course, we're widening to the inside towards the median, and that'll of course narrow up the median. And with the concrete barrier, the lanes will be fairly close together. And of course, we may be looking at sound walls along the corridor as well. So the character of the road, the appearance of the road will be different. It'll be a little unusual as compared to what folks are used to out there.
Now, Dave, as Scott just mentioned, for the most part, we widen toward the inside. And that's true with most projects along the corridor when we're talking about adding additional lanes. Why is that so important?
Well, it's really important for a couple of reasons, especially, I think, highlighted in the Harrisonburg area, where we are building or widening an existing interstate through the middle of a city, because Harrisonburg exists on the east and west side of the city, but not only the city, but also James Madison University. And in a consistent theme, we talked about consistency before, we really want to maximize the use of our existing right-of-way. It keeps our footprint small from an impact perspective, from an environmental perspective, and from a cost perspective, because right-of-way is expensive. So we are widening to the median side on the Harrisonburg widening project to the greatest extent possible. There will be some activities that occur on the outside. We might have some shoulder widening that has to exist on the outside. Scott mentioned sound walls before. We've talked about stormwater management. There's not a lot of place to put stormwater management in this project, because although it's a kind of a rural interstate system, we're in one of the more dense sections from a development perspective along the corridor, and we have to find places to, treat water or runoff water for, quality and quantity purposes. And that's going to be a challenge in Harrisonburg. So there may be some little pockets here and there where we have to acquire maybe a little bit of right-of-way or an easement for stormwater management. Drainage is always a challenge. The cross pipes, where do we outfall them? Do we have ditches? But really the intent is for the lanes to go to the median side. And as Scott mentioned, having that concrete barrier divider, it starts looking a little more urban, getting a little more urban feel, but it's also protective. You're not going to go over or through that barrier wall in the median. Right now we've got the cable guardrail. We have had situations where trucks in particular can kind of get through that and into the opposing lanes. So a little safer, but a little bit different feel and appearance.
Gotcha. It's a compromise for safety and for being able to, as you said, minimize that footprint along the corridor. We talked briefly about bridges and culverts. Scott, can you kind of take us through which ones we're looking at either widening or replacing along this 5 to 6 mile stretch?
Sure. We have 8 bridges that we'll be looking at either rehabbing and widening or replacing completely. There's northbound and southbound bridges over 2 crossings of Black's Run. We have a crossing over Norfolk Southern Railroad. And on the northern end, we have the crossing over Country Club Road. For the most part, the overpass bridges were in pretty good shape. We do need to replace the Pleasant Valley Road Bridge. It has substandard vertical clearance right now over the interstate. And it's pretty much reached the end of its service life, so it definitely needs replacing. So we'll be tackling that as part of the project. Most of the other bridges through the city have been rebuilt in recent years with future widening in mind. One of the other bridges that we are tackling as part of Smart Scale is the Route 33 bridges, and they'll start construction next summer.
Dave, the work that Scott's talking about fits in with sort of a national focus right now on replacing a lot of these aging bridges. So this fits right in with that.
It really does. What we're doing here in Harrisonburg is, obviously we're going through a process right now of investigating the condition of the bridges and whether we can widen or replace them, and how much does that cost. And, one of the things that we look at is vertical clearance. Sometimes we have deficient vertical clearance and we want to fix those problems. But I think that the approach that we're taking, not only in Harrisonburg, but on the entire corridor is very much in line with the federal focus right now, which is on bridges. And it rightfully should be on bridges. Our interstate system was built in the 60s, and a lot of these bridges are original bridges. And as a Department of Transportation, we're responsible for maintaining these bridges. And every year that these bridges get older, it costs us more and more and more money to maintain. So we do a life cycle cost analysis to determine, over a specific period of time in the future, is it going to be cheaper for us to build a new bridge now, or is it going to be cheaper for us to utilize the existing bridge and widen it? And what we're finding is that due to the age of a lot of these bridges, that it's actually cheaper to build a new bridge. And so we're looking at trying to save the taxpayers money over the long run. But I think that's very consistent with, again, the federal program, the federal infrastructure package that's being discussed. There's a lot of focus on bridge replacements. And I'm proud that the program that we are executing right now is accomplishing that goal. So at least to some degree. I mean, we certainly have a lot more bridges that need to be replaced, but it's very consistent with the federal discussion right now.
So we've got Stone Spring Bridge, Reservoir Road Bridge. Both of those are newer bridges that don't have to be replaced as part of this.
Correct.
And the Port Republic Road overpass bridge, we'll be able to do the widening underneath without having to replace it, correct?
That's correct. The shoulders will be a little bit narrow through there, but we can get through there without having to replace the bridge.
Now, you mentioned the Pleasant Valley Road Bridge. There are some challenges with that project beyond just having to replace the bridge. Can you take us through, because that's something that I think is going to be of great interest to the community. What happens in that particular location?
It sure is. That bridge is in that location for a reason. Designing that bridge is challenging. That bridge crosses over a box culvert that's at a pretty acute angle, skewed to the roadway. And of course, businesses have grown up. A lot of utilities have gone in there. Of course, the biggest challenge is traffic. There's 10,000 vehicles a day that drive over that bridge every day. So closing it down and detouring traffic really isn't an option. We have all the businesses, we have several schools, emergency services that all need reliable access to Route 11 and the interstate. I guess also because of the traffic, and we have a lot of congestion right at the intersection with Early Road, right across the bridge. And as part of the project, we'll be taking a good hard look at that intersection, seeing what we can do to improve the situation there.
Okay. Now, Dave, you mentioned a short time ago the possibility of noise walls. We have seen those in other parts of Virginia, but there aren't too many of those along the I-81 corridor, so folks may not be super familiar with their look and their feel and their purpose. So tell me why we build these and what some of the decisions that we have to consider whether to build them in a particular spot.
Fortunately, we have a very structured policy on noise walls. We go through a process to make sure that this is not arbitrary or that there's no personal feelings put into where noise walls are placed. It's a calculation. And what it's really looking at is, are we maintaining with a widening project, such as the Harrisonburg project, are we maintaining the current decibel levels that are reaching receptors, receivers like people's houses or businesses? Are we increasing that? Are we decreasing that? What is the impact on those communities or those, business communities or residential communities? And, perform that calculation and determine if there is an increase in the noise that we consider noise walls. But another important part of this is public input. We survey residents and businesses and make sure that, at the end of the day, if the study says that noise walls are warranted for a particular section of highway, if the residents or the businesses in that area would prefer not to have the noise walls, then we want to know that, because that's, they're the ones, they're the customers, so to speak. So we want that feedback. So it is a very structured process, and one that isn't relying on just what one or two people's opinions are, but the engineering behind it, and then the input from the community.
Okay. And just to be clear, there is no decision yet about noise walls in the Harrisonburg corridor. That's part of the design process.
That's correct.
So if I'm a resident along, the I-81 corridor in the Harrisonburg area, and I'm hearing discussion about the possibility of sound walls, at what point do I raise my hand and say, hey, I want to weigh in on this? I want to make sure I get involved in this. So what's the best way and time to do that?
Well, part of the process, this fall, our environmental section will start the monitoring process, start actually testing levels of sound and evaluating the current noise that's out there. And shortly after that, they'll do their analysis based on future traffic and the future traffic patterns and additional lanes. And at that point, when they determine the areas that might qualify for sound walls, at that point, we'll start reaching out to the public and start getting their input. As Dave mentioned, some businesses, for example, may be more interested in visibility from the highway as opposed to noise walls. Residents may have a different point of view. So we'll go through that process beginning probably in about a year or so, and start determining where those walls, if justified, where they'll go.
The noise walls are one of those details that are certainly a big aspect of this project. Another one, stormwater management. Environmental stewardship has been a big component of all the projects that we're undertaking along the corridor, and a big part of the design process. In Harrisonburg area in particular, that means protection for Black's Run, a treasured local resource. So tell me a little bit about what VDOT is doing as it moves through the design process to protect Black's Run.
Yeah, definitely. We have a very tight focus on Black's Run and stormwater quality, the quality of stormwater management getting to Black's Run. Yeah, Black's Run is considered impaired stream due to phosphorus loading, and we'll be taking extra measures in our water quality facilities to remove phosphorus before it gets to the run.
Now, I've said several times as we've been talking here, I've used the term VDOT or we. We actually not only involves the state agency, but a consultant. And Dave, I know that Harrisonburg widening is not unusual. A lot of our larger projects are involving a partnership between VDOT and a design firm. Tell me a little bit about why we do that and who plays what kind of role in that.
Yeah, for the Harrisonburg widening project, we're working with a team that's led by an engineering consultant named RK&K. And RK&K is a consultant that the department has worked with for many, many years, kind of become a trusted partner, so to speak, and as is, all of our consultant community. But we have billions of dollars worth of construction projects that need to be designed or are being designed throughout the state, not just 81, but, Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, Richmond. There's a lot of construction. We don't have enough designers to even come close to designing all of those projects because it is a very detailed process, very time-consuming process. And so we work with consultants just like, all state governments and federal governments because, when we have heavy workload, we can get assistance from the consultants. When we don't have heavy workload, if we were to staff all of those people at VDOT, we wouldn't have enough work for everybody because everybody knows that transportation, right now we're on the up end, the higher end of the curve. Sometimes that curve is on the lower end, but it allows us to have a sustainable level of workforce and accomplish a lot more work by partnering with consultant companies and the private sector.
And obviously, the contract with this design team is part of the overall cost of this project. So bottom line, Scott, how much money are we talking about for the Harrisonburg widening, and what's the schedule? You mentioned a little bit about public input in the next year or so, but we're just getting started with this. So how much and how long?
We're very early in the design process right now. So right now, early estimate is in the neighborhood of $275 million for the complete project. That includes construction, any right-of-way easement purchases, and the design. Schedule-wise, we're looking at beginning construction probably around the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. Again, we're still working on the schedules and estimates. And the construction will probably take right around 4 years.
So 4 years of orange barrels and heavy equipment working along this pretty busy corridor. What's it going to be like for the motorist when this is happening?
It is maintenance of traffic is what we refer to the design of the roadway during construction, how we'll deal with traffic during construction. Motorists will be looking at barriers along the roadway for large portions of the road. You mentioned cones, be narrowed lanes, probably increased police presence during construction activities. It'll be a challenge, but we will, at the very least, we will always have 2 lanes open during the day. Any lane closures will happen at night. And we've got a large team concentrating on maintaining traffic flow during construction.
Okay. And obviously that's along the interstate main line because we don't have to replace too many of these overpass bridges, maybe a little bit less impact on some of the local roads. But Pleasant Valley Road, you did mention, and I guess I should reiterate that here, we are not closing Pleasant Valley Road
Right.
during that bridge construction. Okay.
That's correct. And I should mention, and Dave has been a large part of this, we've gotten a jump on keeping the public informed of construction activities. Drivers may have noticed increased message boards going up along the interstate, some new cameras that'll help us kind of keep tabs of what's going on during the construction phase. So that'll be a big help both to us and to motorists, so everyone's aware of what's going on.
Excellent. One of my favorite parts of that digital message sign program is that we have some of those not just on 81, but on the roadway approaches. So if you are on Route 11 or Route 33 and you're trying to make a decision about whether to commit to the interstate, you can get some of that vital information right there as well.
Right,
So.
right.
Now, Dave, you mentioned when you were introducing yourself that one of the roles of a program delivery director is to try to minimize the potential conflicts between projects. So this is not the only project planned for the Harrisonburg area. Tell me a little bit about what VDOT's doing to make sure we don't have, say, contractors butting heads as they're both trying to work in the same region.
Yeah, it really is important. Building one project and keeping everyone safe, the workers, the traveling public, truck drivers, is a challenge. When we have projects spread out over the entire interstate system, it becomes much more challenging. So we do have a team that is working to develop some best management practices and communication links between projects so that, we aren't designing something on one project, say for instance, the Harrisonburg widening, and then doing something completely different at Weir's Cave just down the road. We do want there to be consistency. Now, one of the interesting things about the Harrisonburg widening project is, and I believe Scott mentioned this previously, the Route 33 bridge replacements. So that is a smart scale project. It's not part of the I-81 program, the I-81 Corridor Improvement Program, but it's our traditional smart scale, and it replaces the two bridges, eastbound and westbound on Route 33 over Interstate 81, as well as the bridges over the railroad. That construction is starting next year and is expected right now to last 3, maybe 4 years for that total project. And as Scott mentioned, if we start construction on the Harrisonburg widening in 2024, there's some overlap there. So we're going to have to design the projects carefully, considering the Route 33 bridge replacement construction. We're going to have to put in contract requirements that basically states that, the first one to request a nighttime lane closure for work that they're going to do is the one that's going to get it. So everybody needs to be aware. Contractors can work well together as long as they're aware of the requirements and what's needed. And at the end of the day, VDOT is the final arbiter. We will make the decision if there's a conflict between the contractors. So we might have a little overlap period there. In other areas, we have looked at bundling smart scale projects into I-81 Corridor Improvement Program projects where it makes sense. We're doing that in Rafine. We're doing that in Withville. But here, it would require us to either rapidly accelerate the Harrisonburg widening project or delay the Route 33 bridge replacement project. And the first is not feasible because we haven't, we're still early in the design process of the Harrisonburg widening. And the Route 33 or East Market Street bridge replacement is critical. Those bridges were built in 1960. They have past their useful life. When they were building and designing bridges back then, they designed to a 50-year standard. Now we design to a 100-year life cycle. So they are well beyond their intended life. And so we did not want to slow that project down in any way. So that one's going to keep moving forward on its current trajectory. In the Harrisonburg widening, we will effectively design around that construction, so to speak. But yeah, there are conflicts. We knew this when we started, but we have a lot of smart people that are working to resolve those conflicts.
These are the kind of things that keep you guys up at night, trying to, whether it's environmental or maintenance of traffic. I know there's a ton of work that goes into a project of this scale. We're talking about a $275 million project, the biggest one we've seen in the Stanton district. Say the northern half of the I-81 corridor in Virginia in many, many years, perhaps since the interstate was first constructed. But we really appreciate you guys giving us some of the details about what goes into a project like this, from the engineering and the design and the stormwater and working with consultants and contractors to build something like this. But so Dave, Scott, thank you very much for your time and for sharing a little bit of insight and expertise on this. So we have a whole lot of work to be done in the years to come. Including in just a few short years, construction of the widening northbound and southbound of I-81 through the Harrisonburg area. So we again thank you for joining us for this episode of the Improve81 podcast series, and stay tuned for details on more projects to come.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Ken.